Hi there, I'm Kristine Weber, and I love to help mature yoga teachers let their wisdom shine. Um, today I brought my assistant. Well, I brought one of my assistants, but he's obviously on a break right now. But I brought my other assistant. This is Mr. Thrifty. That's really his name. I did not name him. But I brought him because I want to talk to you about your hips today and specifically about the labrum. So, what is the labrum? Let's get clear about that first. And why is it important in yoga? He is really flexible. Okay, so here's your femur. This is not your femur, this is a femur. And here's the neck of the femoral head, and then this is the femoral head, right? And that fits into this greater trochanter. That fits into your hip socket here in the pelvis. And okay, so you have some hyaline cartilage or articular cartilage here at the head of the femur, and then you also have cartilage in that socket, which is called the acetabulum, right? You have cartilage in those two places. Importantly, because then it's filled with synovial fluid, and between the synovial fluid and that cartilage, you have mobility in the hip. Thank goodness, right? Because without mobility in our hip, we can't walk, essentially. We need mobility. I'm going to put Mr. Thrifty down here because we've seen enough of him. So, um, so we've got mobility in the hips because of the way that the ball of the femur goes into the socket in the pelvis and easily moves around because of this cartilage. Now that socket in the pelvis, which is called the acetabulum, it's lined with a pretty thick layer of cartilage that's called the labrum. The labrum, you could compare it to the meniscus. There's some similarities, right? So the meniscus sits on top of your tibia, your shin bone, and then it gives padding and cartilage and lubrication to the knee joint. So the labrum is kind of like the meniscus of the hip. You could say it that way. So the issue, of course, is that we go to yoga class and the teacher says, let's do this thing, whether it's, put your foot behind your head or do a big pigeon pose or whatever, because that stuff goes on in yoga classes all the time. And then people end up getting tears to their labrum, similarly to tearing your meniscus. It's not fun. It doesn't feel good, and it can limit hip mobility. Like the meniscus, it doesn't always have to be repaired. It depends. You need to get that stuff assessed by the proper medical practitioners. But one of the things that kind of blows my mind about the yoga world is like you can just get on YouTube and find some hip opener yoga video, because for some reason yogis are obsessed with opening their hips, whatever that means. And you can tear your labrum. Like it's happens. That stuff happens frequently in the yoga world. One of the statistics I heard is that 50% of the people who start doing yoga get injured and then quits, which is really bad for business if you're a yoga teacher. We don't want people quitting. So my strategy has been, if I can get people to have a relationship with their labrum rather than just like abusing it and being like, oh, that's what the yoga teacher said to do, so I'll do it. I feel like I'm much more successful as a yoga teacher. And the way that I get people to have a relationship with their labrum is by starting to notice, like, you don't even have to know what your femur bone looks like or how shallow your acetabulum is, or you don't have to know any of that. But you do need to develop a relationship with your hip that is healthy and functional, and that you are respecting the limitations of your body. Because the reality is, like, we all are so different. Our femur bones are so different. The way they articulate into the hip socket is so different for everybody, that it's about the relationship. It's through the relationship where you start to understand your movement. and some people in yoga think like, oh, there's no limits, like you can do anything, you can, that's, it's just not true. Not to mention not very helpful, and also cavalier, um, so now that doesn't mean, now I want to just backtrack a little bit, because it doesn't mean that you can't develop more mobility in your hips. Everybody can, but we have our own range, and you are the expert of your own body. You are the greatest expert of your own body. And as you develop that greater expertise, you can start to become more aware of how much mobility you have in your hips and how much you have to be careful with them. And maybe I can't do everything the teacher does. I remember one time I was at this workshop and the teacher grabbed her foot, and I'm back up a little bit. She grabbed her foot, and she started working on, and this, by the way, even though I'm not very flexible, this is a lot of flexibility. So she started working on taking the foot higher, and she had her knee like basically on her shoulder, easily, just was like, and I was like, damn, that's impressive. And that's not what my hip does. Like if I tried to do what the teacher did, I would be getting surgery. Like it just wasn't possible for my hip. And that's because of how my body is. Like I'm very pitta. I'm not that vata. I have much more pitta. Mm, you know, that's pitta provoked. I've got that kind of, I'm not as much of a warrior. I'm more of a like, I have more of that kind of aggressive mental tendency that I'm trying to take care of. But anyway, like I'm more pitta, so my body's more pitta. And so my body's kind of like made for running and, and jumping and like strong stuff, lifting weights, but I love yoga too. So I'm not I'm not a vata body. That yoga teacher I was just telling you about, I had an extremely vata body, and that's okay. We're all different. Everybody's different, but we can't, as yoga teachers, be like, oh, just do this thing like I'm doing it. Oh, and you can't do it. Oh, you just need to do it more. That's not the case. That's not the case. And I think that message is starting to get dismantled in the yoga world, which makes me feel really good that things are changing. And we're like, hey, yeah, maybe not everybody can do that hypermobile stuff. Um, and at the same time, like it still very much is there. All you have to do is open Instagram and you see, how many people are doing stuff that is not necessarily the healthiest thing for their body. So when going back to my philosophy on this, my theory about this is like, okay, so we start with small movements, and we use them to develop the skill of interoceptive awareness. As we become more aware and more skillful at where is, like, how does my body feel? And by the way, proprioception and interoception, the sixth and seventh of the senses, are skills that we develop. And in our cultures, like in America, I'm an American. In American culture, we're super big on helping kids develop proprioception. We're like, run faster, play soccer, go, all the activities and sports stuff. And so kids often develop proprioception from a very young age. Play baseball, play basketball, play tennis, whatever you're doing, play pool, all of those things are developing proprioception. Interoception is a skill, however, that is not only is it often not taught, it's often denied and crushed out of us. Like, yeah, you big baby, shake it off, get over it, right? Whereas actually, when we start to unravel, or it's not really unravel, start to explore interoception, we start to learn things about ourselves that we just like. It's like this mind-blowing skill, that is like, oh my God, I had no idea that was what was going on when I did that yoga pose, because nobody gave me the instruction to just stop and go slow and explore and notice it. And that skill is transferable to other parts of your life. And as you start to develop interoceptive awareness, you start to be able to better regulate the autonomic nervous system and deal with the stress or the anger or the anxiety or whatever it is that's going on in your life. So I love to use yoga for that. That's how I love to teach it. Like, I don't want to teach yoga that people are going to wake up the next morning and go, I think I have to go to the chiropractor or the physical therapist because I did something in yoga. Like, that to me completely defies the first principle of yoga, which is ahimsa, non-harming. First, do no harm. And that doesn't mean that there's no risk, right? That doesn't mean there's no risk. Like anytime there's any movement involved, whether it's dancing or tennis or jogging or whatever, there is risk. There's always risk. So there's risk in yoga. But as a yoga teacher, my job is to minimize that risk, and not to minimize the risk by saying, don't do that. You shouldn't do that. I'm going to tell you not to do that. But minimize the risk by saying, hey, let's go slow and let's start to explore this thing and let's see where it leads us. And let's develop interoceptive awareness so that I'm giving you the agency. I want you to I'm not going to tell you the best way to move your body. I'm going to teach you how to find the best way yourself. And in my opinion, that's the way of teaching. That's the way to teach yoga, because now I'm giving people a skill that they don't have to come to yoga class to learn. I mean, they come to learn it, but they don't have to be with me in yoga to know how to move their body because they're afraid to move it unless the teacher tells them what to do. That's not empowering, in my opinion. What's empowering is giving folks the skills to be able to learn how to use their body in more functional ways so that they can enjoy their lives and their body feels good, and they can pick up their children and their grandchildren, and they can go for hikes, and they can, dance with their loved ones, and they can, you know, joyfully be in their life. That's what I want people to experience from yoga. So I hope this has been helpful. I want to thank you for spending time with me. I would love to hear your thoughts. That's just what I think. Tell me what you think. So please leave a comment, and I'll see you next week. Lots of love.